My name is Linda Peters. I work here at Esri, but I am also a member of the CARIGEO Steering Committee, and really happy to be here today with this great group of people. This webinar is being sponsored both by CARIGEO and UNGGIM Americas. CARIGEO is an initiative of the Americas region and the committee of UNGGIM. With that, just to give you a little bit of perspective of our great panelists here today, we are first joined by Ms. Paloma Merodio of INEGI. Many of you may know her. She's also the current president of the GGIM Americas and co-chair of the Interagency Expert Group on the SDGs. We're also joined today by Mr. Rolando Encampo, the director of the Statistics Division of ECLAC. I'm also joined today by Mr. Sean McGinnis, who's the GeoPortal Program Manager here at Esri, and Dr. Besham Ramlal, who is a senior lecturer at UWI in Trinidad and Tobago. We also have some interesting partners here today, starting with Kim Valentine of NOAA. She's the acting GIO there. And then Valerie Grant today representing OECS. Sorry, we're getting a pop-up here. Take care of that. We're going to enable live transcription. And so Valerie is representing OECS here today. Valerie is also the president of the GGIM Americas private sector network. So fortunate to have Valerie with us today as well. Some new faces for you from the University of Rhode Island. First, Dr. Austin Becker. He's an associate professor and chair of the Department of Marine Affairs. And he, along with Mr. Noel Hallisey, who's a grad student there, are going to share with us the really interesting work that they have been doing on infrastructure development across the Caribbean. Next, we have some guests joining us from TCARTA, from the private sector, Mr. Robert Graham, who is the hydrospatial director, as well as Ms. Carol Fisher, who is the program manager and lead hydrographer there at TCARTA. And finally, to help us close things up and make sure we are understanding all the messages today, Mr. Alvaro Monet, the Regional Geospatial Advisor from ECLAC. So as you can see, a really large group, a good group of folks, and I hope that you'll stay with us for the whole day today. And we have a lot of content for you to cover. So we'll start out with a brief introduction and talk about the importance of data sharing. And then we'll move into an overview as to the importance of data curation, things like metadata, tags, titles, and more. From there, we'll move on to some of our themes on data publishing, different types of data publishers. So that's where we'll hear from NOAA and from OECS. And then our partners will give us a presentation, both from the academic side and the private network side. And finally, again, a conclusion and some resources we'll leave you with, as always. So a lot to cover. And with that, I want to invite Paloma Merodio to give us her opening remarks. Paloma, please.
Thank you, Linda, and good morning, everyone. I think we're all in the morning in this time zone, since this is kind of an Americas and Caribbean event. So in case we have someone from another latitude, good afternoon, good night. Linda, thank you for sharing how we're going to organize today's event. Really, I warmly welcome everyone to this webinar entitled Good Decisions Need Good Data, a look at good practices on data sharing. And I would like to thank all the organizers. Really, the CARIGEO team is an amazing team, the steering committee, for keeping up with the work. And I mean, this is the fourth webinar of CARIGEO that we have these years. It's a dynamic group, and thank you for opening the space for discussion on these relevant issues at the regional level, as well as the recognition of the value and contribution to all the speakers that we have here today. As Linda said, new faces that we have today, and also our colleagues and friends, that we will have this space today in this webinar to analyze good practices for sharing data and the necessary considerations from the technology side as well as governance in order to share usable authoritative data. Likewise, today it is intended to create awareness of the role and value of the CARIGEO Portal as a tool that facilitates data sharing so that countries of the region have elements for disaster management and response. In that way, important to mention that this CARIGEO Portal is an open cartographic community that is providing the region with analytical tools and web services that are freely available to the community, open data hosting for governments that want to contribute their data to the community, and also interoperable. It's an interoperable platform that works with a variety of locally run software programs. So this CARIGEO Portal is really related to the work that we do at UNGGIM through the IGIF, and specifically with the strategic pathway number 4 of the IGIF, as it is a geospatial data framework that is really setting the guidelines for best practice collection and management of integrated geospatial information that is appropriate to cross-sector and multidisciplinary collaboration. As you can see, we have people from different sectors, from government, academia, private sector, and this is really a multidisciplinary team. So that each member of the region really knows their data management, how to share, reuse, and make this community of users through the execution of well-defined data with certain standards, for organizing, planning, acquiring, integrating, and of course, disseminating geospatial information. So this webinar will include presentations and discussions with perspectives from regional, private sector, academic network partners, and agency level. We will speak of the importance of data sharing from a UNGGIM perspective, as well as a technical and governance perspective. I hope that this webinar will be fruitful. We will divide it into different sessions and address each of the key topics of the importance of data curation and publishing patterns. So I wish you all success. We have a rich agenda, so I don't want to take more of the time. Thank you all for being here. And again, congratulations to the CARIGEO team for having these webinars and this dynamic conversation around data and geospatial information. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paloma. Really appreciate the opening remarks. And we are set for a really good session. So we will move quickly forward, and I would like to invite Rolando and Campo to our virtual stage. Rolando, please, I will stop sharing, sir, and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good day to all of you. Good morning to all of you. I'm going to share my screen. Perfect. So what I'm going to present is as Paloma mentioned, so the way that how to share this support in our region. So I'm going to present what ECLAT has been doing for the support of data sharing in Latin American region. The first thing that I want to show is that we have been giving technical assistance to strengthen this, the geospatial information, in particular with the integrated geospatial information framework. And in the region, we have been in 10 countries giving this technical assistance. And which is important to mention is that from these 10 countries, we have been in 5 Caribbean countries attending. The 50% of our technical assistance have been dedicated to the Caribbean countries in this kind of issues. And so we have been assisting some sub-regional projects from geospatial site in particular with this initiative of CARIGEO. As you know, we have, ECLA has the role of the technical secretariat of CARIGEO, And of course, UNGGIM Americas is leading this initiative, but we are working with them and giving all this technical assistance as Secretariat of CARIGEO here in ECLE, because we have a special regional advisor and a team that is focusing inside the statistics division, but is focusing on geospatial information only. So in some other areas we have been presenting, we have been giving assistance of regional support to some other regions, in particular the capacity building project for the incorporation of disaster risk reduction and sustainable in climate change adaptation with Central America, in particular for public investment with the COSEFIN and Central America members countries. So we have been working with the office with our office in Mexico City, the office that has to that coordinates all the efforts with Central America, Cuba, and Dominican Republic. So we have been working since last year and this year too in this project. And in addition, we have given this. We have been play a role as facilitator of in the articulation and dialogue with the national statistical offices and geospatial organization, just to build and to cooperate with the integration of statistical and geospatial information in Central America, in particular, trying to support UNGGIM Americas with the mega project and to build this process with them in Central America and in this regard. In addition, so we just last Friday, our executive secretariat launched a tremendous project in the north of Central America and the southeast of Mexico. We call it the PDI, the Integral Development Plan for El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, and the south of Mexico. And what we try to be part of this project that contains 114 mega projects for developing and to contain and the migration and to be better, to have build back better in the region. So we decided to create a geoportal using open source, and we incorporate a content manager for uploading all the information that these projects and from the PDI and all the projects that the agency funds and programs has in this region, and try to georeference all the information in this regard. We launched it on Friday, and we are finishing because we are obtaining the information from countries. We have now the information from Mexico, from Guatemala, from El Salvador, and we are expecting the information for Honduras. And of course, so as you know, so we create a geoportal in our Observatory COVID-19, where we incorporate all type of measures and all the measures that countries have made during the pandemic in terms of economic issues, gender, social protection, health, and other actions. So we incorporated during the last years and this month. And from this month, we incorporate a new one, a new layer of the vaccination, and we incorporate the information that comes from our working data, but only for the countries of our region, Latin America and the Caribbean countries. We have how many vaccines, how many have they how many they have complete vaccination process, how many have at least one, and the percentage and all those issues. So we update it every day, this geoportal, and so you can identify and you can know which is the advance of the vaccination in each country from in this COVID-19 geoportal. In addition, so we are going to launch at the during the first middle of October, finally, our new Palestine, where we incorporate a geoportal where you are going to be able to see all the statistical information that we have in our Palestine database in the geographic with the geographic in a geoportal with geographic vision. But in addition, we have a lot of layers of information from land, energy resources, environmental, water resources, all this information. So we have them in our database, and we are going you're going to be able to see it in a map with different layers of this information. This is an innovation from our region for this Palestine, and we are going to launch it at before 15th of October. And finally, so what we are working with two projects that we have some funding, one from the European community and one from the UN project, the development account, is try to incorporate geoportals in statistical offices. And we are working with the geographic information in the countries and the statistical information to build using the Global Statistical and Geospatial framework, using the 5 pillars. So we are trying to involve. Now we have more than 6 countries that are working in this regard, Dominicana, and some other countries from Central and Latin America. And so our plan is to build this project. Is going to be as a time of 3 years. And so the idea is to begin this year. Next year, we are going to build this data portal with statistical geoportals inside the statistical offices, where they could be able to incorporate all the statistical information in a map. So this is what we have been doing in this regard with this project. And lastly, so we are taking all the platform of Yosur, so all the layers, so we are bringing it to ECLAC, and the idea is to incorporate and create infrastructure and an SDI working with the InterAmerican Institute, Historic and Education in InterAmerican Institute. And the idea is that we are going to work together with UNGGIM, CIRGAS, the InterAmerican Institute, and ECLAC to build this SCI for the region, hosting that's, as you know, so ECLAC is going to become the secretariat, it's going to be the secretariat of UNGGIM America. So we are going to work together to build this infrastructure in the region. So what we want to continue doing and moving forward. So to continue with the effort to strengthen national capacities in geospatial information with emphasis in the IGIF, to enrich the regional data ecosystem from ECLAC platforms and projects, to collaborate to achieve regional interoperability objectives, to strongly support the integration of statistical and geospatial data in our region, and to continue, of course, supporting the CARIGEO initiative in this regard. With this, I finish. Thank you. And I'm going to stop share my presentation. Thank you. And over to you, Linda.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rolando. That was great. And I really appreciate you underscoring the importance of the integration of statistical and geospatial information. That's so important. And the work that you're doing there at ECLAC as well to support the global statistical geospatial framework. So really exciting to hear of all the different projects that are going on there at ECLAC in support of the region. With that, I'm going to turn to Dr. Beshem Ramlal and Mr. Sean McGinnis. They're going to lead us through a series of questions and talk to us a little bit this morning about data curation, metadata, tags, title, and more. Beshem, Sean, please, if you would, introduce yourselves and take it away.
Thank you, Linda. I am Beshem Ramlal. As Linda said, I'm a senior lecturer at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. I've been working in geoinformatics since 1988. And a lot of what we do is to look at issues of standards, data sharing issues, and so on. And this has been a very significant part of the research that I do. Sean?
Thanks, Beshem. My name is Sean McGinnis. I'm the GeoPortal Program Manager here at Esri. I've been with Esri for over 6 years now, coming up on 7. Have worked with agencies around the world on coming up with infrastructures to help share and collaborate and help overcome challenges and accomplish a lot of the good work that's being done. Currently, we're working to support 4 different geoportals around the globe with others that are in the works. So excited to have this conversation today and have had a lot of fun working with Beshem to try and prepare for this as we get ready here. So.
Okay, thanks, Sean. I think the first question is, after Rolando and Paloma discuss the importance of sharing data and really to bring home the point that this is very important, and you're seeing that at the regional level, you're seeing that at the global level, and we in the Caribbean should start thinking about how we share data. And I want to start off by asking the question, what are some of the basics that anyone should follow when thinking about sharing data? And I will answer that, Sean, because I think it's really important for people to understand that, sharing data, you simply don't just put it up on a portal and say, all right, well, look, I have data, please consume. What needs to happen is that we need to have some key components of information that would make it easier for that data to be discovered. So one of the key things would be metadata. Do you have metadata? Is it complete? What is metadata? We're talking about information about the data. Who collected the data? What was collected? When was it collected? What levels of detail did you collect? And then in order to make sure that that data becomes more accessible and discoverable, you have to have a thumbnail in terms of displaying the detail or the theme of that data. You should have a clear title. It's like so many things when you're doing searches, you need to make sure that the title is reflective of what that data is about. You also should have a description because once the item is found, people need to know what the data is about. So you need to provide that detail so that people can assess whether that data is fit for use. There's no point getting a lot of data and then you realize after you've downloaded it and brought it into your GIS environment and realize, well, it's not appropriate. That's wasting a lot of good time. The other thing you should have would be tags. A tag is one word or 1 or 2 words that would allow you to search. And in fact, tags are very useful not only for you, but for the machine to be able to recognize the data as well. We'll talk more about that as we go. And then, of course, in order to share data, in addition to having the data and having metadata for it, you need to have the ability to share that data. Are you authorized to share that data? Is it yours to be able to put on a portal? Do you have your agency's permission? Will the law of your land, of your particular country, allow that to happen? What kind of licensing arrangements would you have, and how can people, use the data that you're sharing? So we talk about, Creative Commons. I have a question for you, Sean. In terms of the Caribbean GeoPortal, I have a question about data ownership. If I publish data on the Caribbean GeoPortal, who owns it?
Well, that's a great question, one that comes up often, Beshem. And the person who owns the data is the person who published it. So the data ownership and authority to control it stays with the original publisher that's there. So no data comes over to another place, and then you lose ownership. It stays with the ownership there. There are ways to contribute and share it more broadly to get further adoption of using the data, like through a living atlas or something like that. But the original publisher always keeps ownership of that data.
Okay, thanks, Sean. And I know you have a couple questions for me now.
Yeah. We started talking about the data curation side of it, right? As we start to get all of these individual items with their good detail and the content and the metadata. But around the data curation side, what are some of the things that we should be caring about or thinking about as we're performing data curation in these regional geoportals?
When we talk about data curation, we are talking about making sure we document details about the data set. Now, why is this important? If you're sharing data, you want your data to be used. In fact, the more people use your data, the more useful the data becomes. And in fact, it's the better return on investment. You could think about it as spend once and use many times. So you want to document your data. We need to follow standards. We need to make sure that data becomes discoverable and useful to as many people as possible. And the other reason why you should document your data is because someone can assess fitness for purpose, but you can also protect yourself from liability, because you can always say that the intended use of this data is for X, Y, and Z, so that you don't get yourself exposed to any kind of issues, because you have stated up front, this is what it's for. It's important to align to standards like the Global Statistical Geospatial Framework and IGIF, as Rolando mentioned before. One of the things about documenting and curation is we have to think about it as what we call truth in labeling. If ever you go to the supermarket, and if you have concerns about cholesterol, and you have concerns about sugar content and so on, you look at the label on the item in the grocery to tell you, and you expect that label to be truthful so that you don't get yourself having too much cholesterol or too much sugar. And that's the same thing with your data. You want to have a truth in labeling so that people can assess whether it's appropriate for their particular use. We can think about it as well as going to the museum, and you have a curator who, if you look at items in the museum and there isn't any metadata with it, how do you know where it's from? You want to know the history, you want to know the background, and that's very important for us. So, we have to do that kind of curation. The other thing about, I mentioned tagging before, and we are used to tagging. We talk about tagging all the time. We haven't flown often in the last few months, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. But when you check your luggage in, it gets tagged. And that tag is read both by humans and by a machine. And that way, the bag is routed in the right destination. Otherwise, you end up with, the bag in one city and in another city, and you don't want that. So it's about making sure you document well. So, we are talking about this, and it's a little bit abstract. So Sean, perhaps what you can do is show us some examples of how this is captured in the CARIGEO Geoportal. So Sean?
Sure, yeah. So I just changed over screens. Did it transition to, are we seeing the item here on the Sargassum application?
Yes, we are.
Excellent, great. So this is an example of a really good display or way that an application can be detailed and shared within the geoportals. It's got a title on it. It has a good subtitle to give you just a little bit more detail that's there, a good description that's on it. So it talks about the spread of sargassum and some of the details around it, as well as that terms of use. So understanding, as people discover this application, how are they able to use it? Are there any constraints? Do they have to have certain documentation or anything like that? So this does a really, really good job on providing that description to expand the understanding of the item. It also has very good tags, and I agree with you 100% with the tagging need. And I think tagging is one of the most underutilized things as we start to build out these geoportals, because it's no longer just people going in there and looking for pieces of information. As more and more of these systems get stood up, there's machine-based reading that's going through looking for items, and these tags are discoverable by machines. So this is a very, very good example of how an item can be detailed. Another example is from the recent release of the 2020 land cover data. So this is the 10-meter resolution data for the globe. And here we see another item here. So this is an authoritative data set. So for the people in the webinar, as you're publishing items into the Caribbean Geoportal and you're an authoritative data provider, you can tag these as authoritative. So people know that as they're bringing them in to support their cartography or the analysis, there are they know that this is the authoritative data set and they're using the right one. And again, it goes into additional detail. When was it mapped? What you can do with the layer? How is it processed? Good tagging on it as well to make it discoverable by people as well as machines or other applications in using the data.
Thanks, Sean. I have a question. Since you're on the Caribbean Geoportal, one of the questions I would have, I've noted based on all the web portals I've looked at, that there are very different types of data sets that are being published. What are some of those data sets being published, and can you give some examples?
Sure. So this is a dashboard that I use, that I created, that follows all of the use of the geoportals. And this one's filtered down by just the Caribbean Geoportal. So as of today or yesterday when its script last ran, we have over 9,600 items that are shared within the Caribbean Geoportal. And we have a lot of different types of items that are shared. The most common are feature services. So these are the sharing of the vector data as services within the geoportal. Then the next is forms, web maps, etc. So, but those are just a few of the examples of the data that's in there. Let me expand this to make it a little bit easier to see. As we take a look at it here, we can see there's the feature services, forms, Word documents, web maps, Excel files, shape files that are in there, web mapping applications, a whole number of different types of data that exist, but they're not all just vector based. There are also 3D, and we'll have a presentation from T-Carta in a little bit talking about some of the scene data and the 3D that is being shared and accessible through these items. So there's a whole number of different ways that you could share the different types of data that we work within the geospatial industry.
Great, thanks, Sean. And I know you have a question for me in terms of these different types of data sets.
Yeah. So, when we're let me just kind of flip over here. I'm sorry, juggling back and forth here. As these groups are sharing their data, what are the differences in quality and level of detail that we're seeing depending on who's producing that information?
Yeah, one of the things we have to realize, if we look at the Caribbean Geoportal, in fact, any geoportal at all, you will see that you have different types of data from different producers. Mapping agencies often would produce authoritative data based on their particular set of legal requirements and set of national standards and so on, as opposed to statistical agencies who also will have their different standards and their different specifications and in fact different regulations. So what a mapping agency will provide, for example, could be very detailed down to individual buildings, individual sewer covers. However, a statistical agency, because of privacy regulations, they have to anonymize the data. They have to aggregate that data to perhaps a census district or a community, because they can't share data that will breach anyone's personal privacy. On the other hand, if you're a crowdsourcing type organization, OpenStreetMaps, other types of organizations, your data may not be authoritative. It may not even be 100% complete, but it can be used to complement other data sets. But you also have the private sector, you have NGOs, you have academia, you have others as well, who may provide complementary data sets that will support the activities that are appropriate here. So we will see examples from the University of Rhode Island. We will see authoritative sources such as NOAA, NASA, USGS, and even CDEMA in terms of their providing data sets. And again, depending on their particular set of priorities and their set of standards and their sets of regulations, the quality, the level of detail, the actual thematic focus would be different as well.
Great, yeah.
So, Sean, let's talk about WebGIS and portals. You know, not every agency in the Caribbean is leveraging WebGIS. So where do I begin? If I wanted to share in the portal, for example, can I use the Caribbean GeoPortal, or can I use something else where if I have servers and so on, and then share that through the portal by putting in links? You know, what are my options?
Yeah, that's another common question that we hear. And data sharing can be done across all levels of geospatial data creation and use right now. You know, it could be if you are developing shape files, there you can reference your shape files up as items. If you have OGC standard services, we can register those items so that it's always pointing back to your true authoritative source. But the first thing to do is getting within the Caribbean GeoPortal is getting that login, creating the user, and becoming part of the community. From there, you can work through the different scenarios as I referenced, whether it's uploading your file-based data, referencing your service data, or creating your own maps or applications within the GeoPortal. You can just get started doing that with that community login. If you are a data producer already and getting started, yes, share your data, bring it in here, allow our community, the Caribbean GeoPortal community, to access your data and further leverage the work that you're doing. Let me jump over to another screen here. So another option for data producers are establishing your own destinations on the Caribbean GeoPortal. And if you want to work with us in developing one of these, contact us. What these become are their own destinations that are part of the Caribbean GeoPortal. So here, if you look at the URL, it's haiti.caribbeangeoportal.com. And this was set up right after the earthquake and the storm that blew through shortly thereafter, with the goal of providing information and data to the community. So whether they're web applications that are showing where are susceptible to landslides, to other applications for the hurricane and cyclone information, recent earthquakes, et cetera, ways for people to very quickly start to utilize this geospatial information. But also for the more advanced users who know how to use geospatial data, here's a gallery of data sets that can be used to help support the operations that are going on there. And here, a lot of these are coming from the HOT OSM or some of the other work that was done. But for communities that are data producers, you can create your own galleries there. So there's a number of different ways we can get started in sharing the data from, you as the data producer uploading your files through to, working collaboratively and establishing a destination on the GeoPortal to help people find your data in a single place from a number of sources.
But Sean, if I'm working with open source tools, if I'm working with something like QGIS, can I still share my data on the Caribbean GeoPortal?
Yes, and I sometimes, working at Esri, get a little grief about using a Mac, but I have QGIS installed on my machine, and that's the GIS app that I have on my machine. So you can access the files that you're creating and share those upload them as items, whether it's, shapefile, file databases, GeoJSON, CSV, any number of different file formats that are there. For more service-based GIS, as long as they're OGC standard services, we can reference those items and share them out. So the items are always going to be pointing back to the authoritative source and shared through, so people can use them within their desktop GIS or within their web applications. And like I said, within QGIS and using that, you can actually use the data that's inside the GeoPortal. So you can connect to the GeoPortal to discover data and services that are there to bring in to support your cartography and your analysis work.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Yeah, and so let me just flip back here. As we all know, and in working in the Caribbean community and geospatial, the Caribbean is susceptible to many different disasters. How do we support these organizations before, during, and after? How can the GeoPortals support these responses, or all stages of the emergency planning?
That's a great question. And I will tell you that I am proud of being a member of CARIGEO that we have been able to create the Caribbean GeoPortal. But the CARIGEO portal in itself is really like a vehicle. It's a vehicle that needs to be driven, that needs to be taken to a destination, and the quality of that ride that you get in your vehicle is very much dependent on how well you prepare, how well you make sure that you have all the necessary components. The fuel to drive the vehicle will be data, and that fuel, the quality of that fuel will determine whether you have a smooth ride or not. And therefore we need to prepare, down even at the community level. We need to make sure that we understand that content is essential to supporting the work that you do before, during, and after disaster. You have to have content, but you have to have content in the context in which you're operating. Different countries in the region would have different challenges based on their particular geography. Some will have to deal with volcanoes, others deal with flooding, others deal with earthquakes, others deal with hurricanes. And therefore, you have to be proactive. You have to think about, well, I have to get my data organized. But the thing is, some of us will keep that data within country. But from the lessons we've learned, one of the lessons out of Haiti, for example, it's important to make sure that you share it out. So in case anything happens at home, you have a redundant site with that data to support the work that you're doing. And I'm sure, Sean, you have, from a technical perspective, some of the kinds of things that would be required to make sure that we could do this. But definitely, in terms of the kind of data sets we need to make sure that we are proactive and we prepare. So Sean, perhaps you could show some examples of the kinds of content in the particular context that these have been provided.
Yeah, and just to expand on that a little bit, one of the other aspects of it is being able to mobilize rapidly in support of these things, where it's becoming easier to deploy things and be more agile in responding. with the Haiti GeoPortal, as the events were unfolding, we had gotten that up and running relatively quickly. And the team was mobilizing through our disaster response program to catalog the information that was there. So as new items were coming online, we were able to start to reference them and put them in there quickly in support of what the community was needing. You know, some of the other examples that are out there with access to the authoritative information and support, you know, we spent a lot of our last webinar with NASA talking about the data sets that they provide through the Caribbean GeoPortal. Another one who we're just wrapping up the deploy of their microsite within the Caribbean GeoPortal, and we'll hear more from them later on as well, is NOAA. NOAA has a wealth of information, dynamic information. They have their web apps, they have story maps that provides the additional context with the content in the data. So to provide additional understanding that's there. There's also their data layers and the information that others can use to bring in support of response or preparedness. But beyond just those high level kind of data sets and the common themes across there is the community itself. When we talk about the Caribbean GeoPortal, community is one of the key parts of it, where the data, the skills, and the technical capabilities come together. It helps build and strengthen that community. And here's a page that's rolling out within the Caribbean GeoPortal to help build the community, where it's explaining what our community is, why it's important to us, people that we're working with, how to create an account within the GeoPortal to get started. Previous events, there's a number of events that go on, and this list is going to continue to evolve. So links to recordings from previous events or the UNGGIM America's Side event that occurred recently. The final is something that I'm pretty excited about, is a community survey and dashboard. So this is going live today, where it's allowing people to identify their areas of interest and expertise, where they're working, the regions that they're working, and how they see themselves contributing to the community. Are they willing to be mentors or be contacted by other members of the community, or are just kind of taking a step back for right now and just kind of seeing what's there? There's going to be a dashboard that comes out with it that's going to allow people to filter down based upon the themes or areas of interest that they're looking for. And it will return not only a map to show the people who have those experiences, but also a list. And for the people who opt to share their email, a way for people within the community to contact them. So that last point there, within the community, there's a need to have a community account in order to be authorized to access these. So thinking about the building out of this community to help support the public and the partners, you know, these are the different facets that we're seeing within the GeoPortals.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Thanks for the conversation. I think I don't know if we have any more time, but thank you very much. We would like to hand back to Linda, and perhaps if we have any time, we'll take a question or two. If not, we can move on to the next speakers.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat, Sean, if you can open that up. Renee had asked a question about restrictions for completing the upload of data, and another one on standard tags. Perhaps you could address those.
Sure. So the first question from Renee, are there restrictions for completing uploads of data if the title metadata tags are not populated? Currently, there is not. People can bring the data that they have with them and share it up. Now, in the back end, the data that is not as complete is not discoverable. So when it's searched for, etc., it doesn't come up higher in the list. So currently there's not a restriction, but its utility is a little bit obscured because it is not discoverable, and then is less likely to be used right now. The one thing is with the authoritative tag that's in the data sets, there is a certain level of completeness associated with the item that it has to meet before it can get to that value. So for something to be deemed authoritative, there is an expectation of some more detail on it. And then Robert, question for you on that is, are there standard tags to choose from?
Way in the environmental decision making. I think you just tap that again for me, Sean. And so your data and information and knowledge about things like your monitoring and your evaluation. Well, this is important to apply the knowledge gained from the experience as well as the evidence and analysis to improve the development outcomes. Next slide, please. And so as we look at things like your research and your systematic observation, decisions makers really should be able to both obtain and understand high quality data and really the best practice to facilitate sustainable use of the member states' terrestrial, marine, and coastal resources. And so all of this is really imperative. So, and capacity development, this really is something that needs to occur at the level of the individual, the organization, the communities, the sectors, the ecosystems, and the enabling environment. Next slide, please. So, as we really look at this slide, we come to realize that there is several different reporting and framework challenges, and these, if we look at it, there is duplication due to the same information produced several times for different purposes, difficulties in accessing and producing the required source data. Some of these challenges we all know very well. The fatigue of the member states with multiple requests from different agencies. Some of them, the chairman and Sean alluded to, and some of these are things like geoportals help us to solve. So that is, and I'm going to tell you how the OECS is leaning towards some of these activities in terms of solving some of these challenges shortly. Next slide, please. So there's really a proposed OECS in environmental information system structure that was really developed to address the making sure that the member states are using the best environmental information, and it requires an interlinking of the existing individual. So the member states and the associated regional and thematic portals, making sure that the OECS will serve as the primary environmental information system for member states that do not have their own. And this is also a cost-effective and inclusive way of doing it. And we are looking at how GIS will also underpin that as well. Next slide, please. So really, the blue economy is something that is really critical to this block. And so in pursuit of the blue economy approach, it is underpinned by several principles that is outlined. It's what is called the Eastern Caribbean Regional Ocean Policy, or ECROP. And of particular relevance to today's discussion is outcome 5, which basically speaks to the coastal and marine spatial planning and integrated management of marine and coastal resources. We just heard a presentation from Noah that articulated several of the different applications that kind of monitoring can have. And this is really being delivered through a program financed by the GEF and the World Bank And so there's a lot of activity that is currently taking place. In fact, my the consultancy that I'm currently executing for the OECS, which is really developing a geospatial information strategy for them, comes under this project. So next slide, please. So just to speak about that, so the OECS has recognized that they have been using geospatial data in several of their different projects, but they did not have a more formal structure and a framework as well as a roadmap for implementation. So that's one of the things that I'm currently assisting with. They've recognized that geospatial data has become the foundation of many of the decision making at various levels, from your sustainable development planning, your environmental planning, your marine spatial planning, business development and investment decisions, your emergency management, all of those activities. And so the recognition is really there that it requires broad range of accurate, good and quality data that is compatible geospatial data to effectively address some of these challenges. So what it is that we're doing then in the next slide is that we are looking at some of the current initiatives that are ongoing. I mentioned the Caribbean Regional Oceanscape project. There's also a regional health project where they're looking at what are the existing health facilities in the regions, really mapping them out, and also putting in relevant data as to capacity and as well as and resources that exist so that that database can be there. There's also a school connectivity mapping project that is kind of looking at where the schools are located and the kind of infrastructure there are there technology deserts and so on. And there is also an enhanced country poverty assessment looking at the social issues surrounding those. There's also a St. Lucia Fire Services GIS kind of mapping out things like hydrants and other things like that. However, these are just some sprinkling of the projects that are there, and a recognition that a more holistic approach is really needed to get some of these things done. And so with that, the next slide. The strategic direction has been formalized at this point in time, and it's about formalizing geospatial information within the Commission so that they can better serve the OECS region and assisting those member states in their shared commitment to the process of sustainable development, as well as maximizing the geospatial information benefits for each of the member states. So recognizing that a lot of the member states are at different levels of geospatial development, and making sure that the OECS can also be a leader in helping them to move forward. So there's opportunity for many partnerships and collaborations with different entities as well, including CARIGEO. Next slide, please. And so the strategic plan really outlines the 6 goals which would really ultimately help the Commission to move forward. And these include successfully completing the current projects and establishing other projects that has GIS component, relevant projects, developing a mechanism to facilitate data discovery, and that cannot be overstated. We've heard Bisham and Sean speak about that earlier. So with the relevant metadata. So everything that is being created now is having the metadata because that was a challenge in the past. Developing a regional shared services capability. So having that geo platform for the OECS and having collaborations with other entities to ensure wider reach, such as CARIGEO. And ensuring the accountability and effective development and management of the regional geospatial resources. So being really a leader and championing that cause in that OECS block, and establishing the regional capacity building program that will help to get persons to the level that is needed, and establishing that leadership for the regional geospatial community as well. So those are some of the ambitions as we are working through this process. Next slide, please. So and one of the things that is really driving that, apart from all of the activities that we've spoken of before, is the fact that there is this big recognition that the geospatial really support the SDGs. So one of the things that the Commission has as a major goal is making available and accessible geospatial data and products and services to all the users in order to facilitate better planning, sustainable use and management, and the development of the resources in the OECS. And this really ties in nicely with the SDG 17, and in particular target 17.8, where it speaks about enhancing capacity building support to the developing countries to increase the availability of reliable data disaggregated by both income, gender, age, race, ethnicity, migratory status, disability, and geographic location. So there is this recognition, and the leadership of the OECS recognizes also the integration of geospatial with statistics to localize, to make sure that it becomes more relevant to the member states that they're serving. And so data, the recognition is certainly there that good data leads to good decision, and that there is reason to make sure that the Commission is at the forefront of providing that quality authoritative data. So with that, thank you very much, and I'd be happy to take any questions on behalf of the Commission.
That was great, Valerie.
So we've got a few minutes here for open questions and answers for any of the people who have been presenting this morning, or and if anybody's had some thoughts or some comments come up, now's a great time to share them. No. Well, if any questions do come up and you think of them, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can route them to the correct people to get them. Valerie, again, thank you very much for that. Really appreciate that. And now we're going to shift over to whoops, one slide behind. There we go. I'm going to be talking about the partnering. So working with partnering and working within the academic and private sector, and partnering to make a difference. So our first presentation is going to be, I'd like to invite Mr. Robert Graham, the Hydrospatial Director for TCARTA, and Ms. Carol Fisher, the Program Manager and Lead Hydrographer from TCARTA, to join us.
Greetings and salutations from TCARTA. Thank you for joining us today. Carol and I would like to show you what we shared on the Caribbean GeoPortal. Carol will share the methods and purpose of a sample we have shared to demonstrate the value of satellite-derived bathymetry, or SDB. I will share the process for loading and sharing data on the GeoPortal. Since this is a lightning talk, we don't have a lot of time to talk about who TCARTA is, so we'll share some links in the chat. We're going to talk about some sample data. I'm going to talk about the steps to publish, some wrong turns, some lessons we learned along the way, things you might encounter if you try to publish things. Why do we publish, and then our catalog eventually. Here's an index of what TCARTA has available on the GeoPortal. We have Bahamas, Antigua, Barbados, and a little bit in Jamaica. Here's some links to follow us on LinkedIn. Please follow us. And now we'll hear from Carol in Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for that introduction. Now, an important aspect of our data management process is actually the collection of our data, and TCARTA specializes in satellite-derived bathymetry, SDB, to acquire depths of our water bodies, whether oceans, lakes, rivers. And in this particular case, we're focusing on the Lucan Archipelago in the Bahamas. Now, a fun fact is that this is one of our biggest data sets in one project. Approximately 120 scenes from Sentinel-2 imagery was used in this particular project, and an area of 120,000 square kilometer of depths were produced at a 10-meter spatial resolution, and these depths were actually reduced to lowest astronomical tide. Now, the SDB process was further validated using ISAT-2 space-based laser to improve on our QA/QC of the process. The depths were delivered in an XYZ format and reduced to horizontal datum of WGS84. Now, what is the purpose of this data? The purpose of this data is to use to fill data gaps that currently exist in our marine charts. In addition, it is used for hydrographic survey planning to assist with reconnaissance, to identify your no-go areas, your shoal areas, to improve on the safety of sea, safety of life and equipment at sea. Excuse me. And in addition, the data is used for environmental monitoring to detect changes in the marine environment for conservation and preservation of our marine assets. So let me hand you over to Robert, who will continue on the process of data publication.
Okay, here's the money slide. First, you got to create an account. Contact Esri so you can be an authoritative source. That's step one. You need to get a good score when you're publishing things on the Geo Portal. Things I found that I tried to do. I mean, initially we just tried to do them with how they loaded into the portal, and they didn't like that. So you have to watch this item information, the score here, to get a higher score. You need at least an 80, a B. So you need 2 words in the name, 7 words in the summary, about 350 words in the description. The description can hold images and URLs. That's what I'll say down here about leaving context. I like to update the thumbnail to be more graphic. So we're mostly graphical people. Include some tags to make it to be found a little easier, and share with everyone. I mean, that's why we put things on the Geo Portal, is to share and mark it as authoritative so it'll be found. Some other nice to haves, it doesn't go into the score, but it would be good to have ranges on your field attributes. You know, how good is what's the resolution of the data? What's the scale to use it at? Don't use it beyond this kind of scale. There is a metadata that can have the history of the data product as it's been developed. And then there's also a documents page. Once you have it on the Geo Portal, you need to promote it up to the Caribbean Geo Portal site. And that was our first lesson. As you're going through and publishing things, this bar here will move from left to right as you add more and more things. So some wrong turns. The big assumption was that the CaribbeanGeoportal.com was the same as the Carib Geoportal on ArcGIS. One's based on the other, but in order to have your data found on the Caribbean Geoportal, it has to be promoted up again. So not just marked as authoritative, but Esri marked it as authoritative. And you need to get a good score, like I was saying before. When we initially tried this, we sent off an email. It went to the wrong person. Esri's a big organization. It got denied by the elevation group because it was that's how it got routed, and a little bit more about that. But and we assumed the worst, but we soldiered on and we kept going, and now we're talking to you about this. So another thing was make sure you fully describe and summarize your data. I mean, you know your data, but the people using it will not. So make sure you give some very good descriptions. It's not a curse. It just takes some work, and it does take some work. Here's why we publish. Here's some stories about why we publish. We think satellite-derived bathymetry is a good way to infill between surveys. Putting a survey vessel out in the water gets to be expensive. It's needed, but it's not needed everywhere. And so in between all those things, you can do some satellite-derived bathymetry. And we have some use cases and some survey planning story maps as well. So go check those out. We hope to be able to publish this in more places. Like I said, the initial one we got denied on was the elevation geoportal. So this is elevation data. We should be able to put it there. It just didn't meet their standards, and we'll have to figure out what that was or what that should be. Living Atlas of the World. And then there's a couple other places. I'm sure some of the other presenters here have some ideas, and I would love to hear them. Please reach out to us for more. I'm a big TikToker. Please follow me on TikTok if you'd like to see a short video on the steps that we just went through to publish data. Here's our status map. We did a needs analysis of the Caribbean for bathymetry data. And this is a status map on the left, and then this is our catalog on the right. All right, thank you for listening. Enjoy.
Stop that screen from sharing. Thank you very much, Robert and Ms. Fisher on that one. Does anybody have any questions for Robert or Ms. Fisher on their presentation that's there?
I see a question in the chat from Cecile, Sean.
Okay. Yeah, I'm juggling too many windows here trying to keep track. So Cecile, you asked the question, why would a country or organization wish to share their data via this portal, given the steps and the pitfalls that may occur? What are the real benefits from this work? Well, the real benefits from this work are sharing your data out to a broader community to allow it to be utilized. When you share information to the Caribbean Geo Portal, it doesn't just end there. It feeds into the broader,
Sean, sorry to interrupt you. I know what your answer would be. I would like to hear from Map T. Carter.
Oh, my.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Yeah, Cecile, this is Robert. We wanted to share it to just show the benefits of satellite-derived bathymetry over some of the other ways to collect bathymetry data. It's, because it's remote sensing, we don't have to put a boat in the water. It's many times cheaper. It's not as accurate for sure, but we just wanted to share the value that we see from the products that we're making. So this is the sample that we put out there, and hopefully it'll lead to more. So that's why we should.
And may I just add to that as well, Cecile, what I have found is that there are many NGOs or environmental entities that really need some amount of bathymetric data, and they scramble around to get that information and in terms of up-to-date data. And so putting it out will be able to provide those organizations don't necessarily have the funds to go and do traditional multi-beam data to access that data free of cost. So that's another benefit of sharing the data.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carol and Robert. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
That was great. Thank you very much, Robert and Carol. Now I'd like to introduce our next set of speakers. Our next set of speakers are from the Department of Marine Affairs at the University of Rhode Island. And with us today, we have, let me get my video back on here, my apologies. We have Dr. Becker, Dr. Austin Becker. He's an associate professor and chair of the Department of Marine Affairs. And we have Noah Halazzi, I apologize if I butchered your last name there, a grad student in the Department of Marine Affairs as well. And they will share their story on inventorying critical coastal infrastructure. And I will pass that over to you two.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you so much for having me and Noah as part of this webinar. I'm Austin Becker. I'm a professor in the Department of Marine Affairs here in Rhode Island, and Noah is a grad student here. We've been working on a project for several years now, which we've finally finished at least the first major phase of it, which is what I'm going to tell you about today. I want to start out by just kind of grounding us all in what the issues are that this project was motivated by. And that's really the coming problem and the current problems associated with climate change for the Caribbean and other parts of the world. So, of particular note here are the potential for a doubling of the big Category 4 and 5 tropical storms, plus sea level rise, which could be 2 meters or more by the end of the century, more inland flooding events, And you kind of bundle this together, and what we're worried about here is what is today the 1 in a 100-year storm event, or the 1% annual probability for flooding, becoming perhaps the 1 in 3-year event by 2100. So this presents a lot of challenges for lots of parts of the world. Really anywhere there's a coast, almost. But for the Caribbean, it's a particularly big challenge. 60% of the region's population, 70% of the economic activity is within 2 miles of the coast. There's a lot of dependence on tourism and low-lying coastal areas, and the losses associated with these kinds of events, sea level rise and storms, have been projected to be as much as $22 billion annually by 2050. So a lot of planning, a lot of strategy is necessary here. And the project here was really motivated by a UN Conference on Trade and Development effort that I was part of a few years ago, to develop a way to conduct vulnerability assessments for ports and airports in the Caribbean. And we had a series of workshops in Jamaica and St. Lucia and Barbados, where we met with planners and other decision makers from ports and airports and the various municipalities to develop this approach to conducting climate vulnerability assessments. And one of the upshots of the workshops was there's a real need for more data in order to conduct the kinds of models that are necessary to help us understand what the risks may be going into the future. So we wanted to contribute some new data that can help understand vulnerability on a regional scale. And that means we need to have a standardized approach to collecting such data. So for climate risk models, in particular sea level rise and storm surge risk models, we really need 3 major buckets of data. Elevation data, that's very high resolution, bathymetry data that we just heard about, and asset data. So, what is it that's actually at risk from these kinds of events? So our project is just working on contributing the asset data. We leave the elevation and the bathymetry to others, and we leave running those storm risk models to others. But we've created here a way to inventory critical coastal infrastructure land use across the entire Caribbean region. And our primary goal was to develop this data set for use in hazard risk assessments, but it can be used for a lot of other applications as well. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the project and show you how to access the data. If you're interested in using the data or creating your own similar data or expanding our data set, we're happy to talk about that too. So we wanted to create an inventory for the entire Caribbean, so 28 island nations and territories. And to do this, we wanted to map the land use itself, so how much of an area is devoted to being an airport or a seaport or an energy facility, as well as the specific structures and uses that are on that land use parcel. So we limited our study to just infrastructure that's within a kilometer of the coast, and we collected from other sources point data, so location, just a single XY coordinate for airports, seaports, energy facilities, and waste and water treatment facilities. And then we expanded the point data into a polygon data set. So to do this, we used heads-up digitizing, which is essentially using aerial imagery and following a standard operating procedure that we've developed, basically tracing out these different uses using publicly available online imagery. And accompanying the data set is this very detailed recipe, basically, this SOP, standard operating procedure, to allow others to go back and do the same exercise again, maybe in 5 years or 10 years, if you're interested in how land use has changed over time, or if people are interested in expanding beyond these 4 infrastructure uses, this standard operating procedure could be applied to other kinds of uses, emergency facilities, schools, shelters, beaches, etc., in order to create these standardized, replicable data sets of land use. So we followed a workflow that we developed for the project that really just boils down to identifying, what's at the facility, drawing these polygons using heads-up digitization, and then entering some details about the assets into the attribute table for the different parcels that we mapped. So just to give a quick example, you can see one from each of our 4 study areas: airports, seaports, energy facilities, and wastewater treatment facilities. And these are the things that we mapped for each. So just to look at the airport example, the parcel itself, which is the full extent of the polygon there, the building, the hangar, the terminal buildings, the runways, the aprons, and the taxiways. And we did this for each of our 4 types of facilities. And so I won't go into the details of all of these numbers, but needless to say, we've got a summary of all of the different infrastructure types and the various buildings, etc. And we're hoping that this work can be used for a whole variety of purposes, from planning and research to disaster relief and response. Again, if one wanted to expand to other types of infrastructure, somebody could use this basic approach to do that, or to bring this approach to other parts of the world, say the South Pacific or other areas. And we've shared the data through the Caribbean Geo Portal, and also on, well, I'll share the link to this. Actually, I'll see if it loads up on its own. It did, great. So you can go to this link and you can see some details about the project. You can download, unless it's blocked by Chrome, you can download the SOP itself, and you can access the dashboard to actually zoom in on some of the infrastructure that you might be interested in your area or regionally. So we can just, we can zoom in here and take a look at this, or zoom back out and look elsewhere. So that is where I will stop. And again, we have had quite a number of people working on this project, including NOAA has done a huge amount of work on it. We got a little bit of funding from the Cruise Industry Charitable Foundation, who obviously is interested in cruise ports in the Caribbean. And we do have a published paper that we can share the link to in the chat, and maybe we'll share the link to the hub in the chat as well.
I was just going to say, that's really great, Noah and Austin. Thank you for sharing that work. And hopefully the folks on the call will see that this is a new, great resource for understanding risk across the region there. And I hope that you use it, you look at it, and give URI your feedback on it. With that, I want to be cautious of time, and just if there's any questions for Austin and Noah, I'll pause for a moment, see if there's anything in the chat. I haven't seen anything come in, but just if there's anyone who has a question, now is the time. All right. Well, again, we'll keep an eye on that. Any questions, please pose them. We can also answer them offline. With that, just a few closing remarks from me. I do want to encourage everyone to please join us in the community. Sean mentioned that new community page, which is live now, so you can go there, opt in, take a look at the information that's there. And if you go to the next slide, Sean, also there is a short survey that you can fill out. We also have a short survey on disaster programs and initiatives. So we're trying to understand from your view what's important to you. If you can help us by filling out those surveys, that would be really great. And again, next slide, Sean, the webinar series that we've been doing throughout the year are all available. So webinar 1 and 2, those recordings are already posted. And when we finish today, we'll post this recording and slides up as well, and we'll share that back to you. So with that, what I'd like to do, if you go to the next slide, Sean, is introduce Alvaro Monet. Alvaro is joining us from UN ECLAC, and he is going to close us out. Alvaro, please, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, dear colleagues. We are reaching the closer of this successful meeting. Many thanks to all the participants and to our outstanding presenters for highlighting the importance of collaboration and partnerships so that the exchange of data effectively can support decision-making and public policies. As established in the guidelines provided by the United Nations through the integrated geospatial information framework, innovation efforts, technology support, partnerships between multiple actors, the creation of capacities and education, aiding value deduction of data, and the establishment of solid governance frameworks are central aspects in improving the management of geospatial information in the Caribbean region, as we have seen today. From the CARIGEO initiative, we are sure that public agencies, international organizations, academia, and the private sector can provide valuable collaboration in the region in these matters. As we have seen in the presentation and discussion today, in hands of University of Rhode Island, University of West Indies, ECLAC, UNGGIM Americas, OECS, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Esri, Geotech Vision, and TCARTA colleagues. So thank you very much to all of you. We want to encourage all to actively participate in all those activities and projects that are focused on promoting the exchange of data in the Caribbean, being aware of the importance regional interest issues such as risk management, climate change, marine planning, and many other topics that demand integrated and interoperable geospatial data. Finally, we would like to announce on the 8th session of the UNGGIM Americas, which will be held remotely in November 16, 18, and 19 this year, to share progress and perspective on the integration processes of statistical and geospatial information, to monitor the progress of the national geospatial data infrastructure based on the guidelines provided by the IGIF, the install to the new UNGGIM Americas Board of Directors, and review the progress of the working groups and associated networks of UNGGIM Americas in the period 2020-2021. So thank you again for your participation. Thank you all, and have a nice day, colleagues, dear colleagues.
Yeah, thank you, Alvaro. Thanks, everyone.